Right now, I'm shooting on the Sony ZV-1. And this camera was designed specifically for vloggers, content creators, and YouTubers. So in this video, we're gonna dive into what makes this camera so unique and if this is the perfect camera for you. Okay, so I've switched over to camera audio. So right now I have the Dfocus on, shooting internal audio, and everything else is completely automated. And we're gonna talk about that in a second because that's one of the really cool things about this camera is they've basically created a ton of automation to make it so that it's easier for you just to hit record, know that you're gonna get the footage that you wanna get. So you have to focus less on the camera work and focus more on the story and the content that you're creating. So I've switched over to my Rode Go just because I want to show you kind of two different setups for recording audio, whether you're right next to camera or you're pretty far away. So I got up super early to chase sunrise. It's coming right over that hill any minute. But I wanted to show you this camera in a vlog-like setting. So we're going to one of my favorite spots that overlooks all of Santa Monica. It's about a 7-mile hike up this mountain. This is a great opportunity to show you all the features packed into this camera in a setting where you might actually be using this camera. So let's dive in with the defocus setting because that's one of the most interesting features about this camera. So defocus on this camera is an automation. Right here on the top, you could set your C1 to defocus. That's what it comes with when you get the camera. And the idea behind this automation is that you click this button, you get blurry background. You don't have to think anything beyond that. One of the limitations with this camera though is that it is a 1-inch sensor. So if you're in this setting, you can get blurry background. But if you are to move further away, you know, as soon as you get a little bit distance from the camera, you're not gonna be getting a whole lot of shallow depth of field because of the limitations of the sensor. So this setting really is useful if you are like waist up, you know, you're doing the vlog-like setting, or, you know, you're sitting down doing like a review or something else where you have about, you know, this size. And you also have to have something interesting in the background. So if you're using this setting and you have a flat wall behind you, it's really not gonna make a whole lot of sense. But in this kind of setting where there's some depth, there's some things going on, you can see that the background goes out of focus and gives you that more like cinematic look that, you know, a lot of creators are going for, especially when you're shooting this content. Makes it super easy. You click a button, boom, blurry background. One of the massive improvements that you just see right out of the gate is the flip out screen to the side. So instead of having a Sony flip up screen, you have a Sony to the side swing, which makes it easier to see yourself. For me, I've always used a side flip, so it makes it really nice when I'm vlogging to be in the setting so that if I put anything on top of the camera, I don't have to worry about it blocking the screen. One other thing that Sony has done that a lot of other camera companies don't even think about is all the ports are on the other side. So when you flip out your screen and you put in a microphone or an HDMI or your power, you can go twist this screen around and you're never gonna hit any ports. That for me is a huge upgrade because it's just one thing that camera companies fail to think about when they're making cameras. The sun is just about to rise. I just got up to the ridge line. You can see it right there. Boom, that was bright. So with this camera, you do get stabilization. However, it does come at a little bit of a cost. It does punch in on the footage slightly. So now this is with the stabilization turned off. You can see how much more shaky the footage is. So I just want to show you side-by-side comparison. Here's with the stabilization turned on, and here's with it turned off. You can see how much of a punch in there is on your footage. And because this lens is a 24-70 equivalent, you're really losing out on some of that width when you turn on the steady shot. However, you really do kind of need that on if you're shooting in, you know, this mode where you're walking and talking. If it's off, as you can see, it's pretty shaky. And I have it on a selfie stick. I'm not just hand holding this camera. If I did switch over to like handheld, this is just a holding it with the nice grips that they give you, then you can see how much shakier it is. It's a tiny camera. It's gonna shake around if you don't have some way to stabilize it. So you are gonna need to use the stabilization that they give you, which means that you're gonna lose out a little bit on the width. Okay, so from here, we're going all the way up here, over to there, and then you can't really see it, but there's a peak way out there, which has a view of all of this. We're gonna see if you know, these clouds clear off and we actually get an awesome morning where you can see the entire Santa Monica Bay. So we have to talk about this product showcase. So when you put a product in front of your camera, it snaps to that object and then goes back to your face. It's another automation, just like the Dfocus. You can set it to C2. That's what it comes native on this camera. But anything you put in front of the camera, boom, it locks in the focus and then switches back to your face. The idea is that, you know, a lot of creators end up talking about products and they end up throwing things in front of the camera. And so instead of doing like the whole hand thing to try and get the focus, I guess that's like a whole thing in the beauty world. But instead of doing this, you know, you could just put a product and boom, it locks focus. And it's really cool. Basically, it tracks your face, and then any object that comes in front of your face, it's gonna lock focus to it. And if you are a creator who does a lot of these kind of like products and you're always putting stuff in front of camera, it's great because you really just don't even have to think about your focus. It just works. So one thing you have to remember, if you're using Product Showcase, it turns off your steady shot. And I just turned it off. You can see it punches in a little bit, steady shot's back on. Let's talk about autofocus. So this camera has advanced autofocus real-time tracking IAF. So when you're shooting, you really just don't have to think about your focus. I've never really played around with manual focus at all on this camera. I don't even know if it's a thing, to be honest. But the autofocus just works so well. Everything you point at, you're gonna have in focus. And whenever you put a face, when your face tracking's on, boom, it's gonna lock to your face. They've really optimized this camera for creators, so you just don't have to think about things. We need to talk about the battery on this camera. So I've found that you basically only get about an hour worth of recording time. So you're gonna need to have 3 to 4 batteries if you're not charging your camera throughout the day. All right, so while we're waiting for the battery charge, because I only have one, let's talk about the slow motion on this camera. So you can do 120 frames per second, but what's really cool is you can do 240, 480, and 960. So you can really slow down your footage to get that dreamy quality. Now, keep in mind, when you're shooting in these super high frame rates, you can only do it in burst mode. So you only get a few seconds and then it stops and it has to process that footage. However, if you're using it wisely, you can get some really cool looking shots by just doing a burst of slow motion here and there. Now, I wanted to try this camera out in a non-vlog style setting. So I put it on my gimbal and I went out with my buddy Travis Elliott and we shot a couple yoga flows. So we were able to get 2 25-minute takes on one battery, and I was able to shoot the entire time without the camera overheating. So if you want to see the full takes that I did with Travis, I'll put links down in the description to his channel, and you can see how this camera performs and how the autofocus works over a long period of time when it's on a gimbal. So we are back in action. I brought along a battery pack. Cool thing about this camera is that you can record and use it while you're plugged in and it will charge. So if you are someone who does something like live streaming, you have 3 ports on the side. You have your power port, which is a multi-port, you have an HDMI port, and then you have an audio in. So you could really use this camera in a ton of different settings, whether you are just run and gun shooting and you carry some batteries around, or you want this in your studio. I have tested this camera out in my studio and it works great. You can plug in audio, you can plug in power, you can also plug in an HDMI and see yourself on a bigger screen. Okay, so we got to the top, but now we have to traverse all the way over to where that kind of puff is out in the distance. So one thing with this camera is you do have internal ND. So when you flip it on, you get, you know, sunglasses on the camera to a degree. Right now my ND's on and I have the defocus turned on. You can't really tell that shallow depth of field because of my distance. However, it's gonna shoot up the shutter speed because the ND isn't super strong in this camera. So if you really wanna get that double that your frame rate look where you get proper motion blur, then you're gonna have to use external NDs to be able to bring down your shutter speed. However, there's no way to screw on ND filters on this camera. So I actually found a solution. You get these little magnets and it adds a little magnetic ring around your lens, and then you can pop on these little tiny ND filters. This is the look when you have high shutter speed, you get some jitter in your frame. It's not the end of the world, it still will work great, and I know a lot of creators aren't gonna care about that. But hopefully on version 2 of this camera, they put in a screw-in filter or add more ND so when you are shooting in bright sunlight, you can have proper motion blur. Just one request from me at least. So Sony's put a few things in this camera that really is geared towards shooting yourself. So this kind of setup. You know, one of them is an auto exposure setting that focuses more on your face. So it takes your face into account versus the background, and it's gonna expose for your face versus if this is a super bright background, you know, cameras typically will wanna expose for that, but this camera caters more towards, you know, focusing on your face. Also, there is a smooth skin effect that they've put in here. Now, I have it on throughout this entire video, and it's not like crazy softening, but it's enough to like make your face look a little bit better. Sony's goal with this camera is to make you look better versus just exposing for, you know, the entire scene. So there's a lot of emphasis in making sure that your face looks good on camera. So overall, this hike was pretty anticlimactic because, you know, not the best view in the world, but hey, it's a great hike. If you're ever in the Santa Monica Mountains, I highly suggest coming up here and coming to this hike. But let's talk about this camera. It's a good camera. I think there's a lot of creators that are really gonna find the automation features in this camera super useful in your content creation process. Is it perfect? No, but I think if you work within the limitations this camera has, then you know you can get a good looking image, and it's super easy to create content, and that's the most important part. And with enhanced autofocus and just, you know, the ability to create your own custom looks for the color profiles, it's great. And I think if you are a content creator and you want a small point and shoot style camera, this would be a good option for you.